सभी को नमस्कार। आज हमारा ये आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चरल हेरिटेज ऑफ इंडिया का एक अलग टॉपिक पर एक सेशन होने वाला है। जैसे हमने इसके पहले भी बताया था कि हम अलग-अलग विषयों को लेकर के आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर का जो अलग-अलग पर्सपेक्टिव्स है, उस टॉपिक को लेकर के हम बात करेंगे। तो आज यहाँ पर हमारे साथ में हेरिटेज ऑफ इंटीरियर डिजाइन इन एंशिएंट इंडिया, इस टॉपिक पर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ सुचिता कामत जी यहाँ पर उपस्थित है। मैं उनका यहाँ पर पहले स्वागत करता हूँ। और उन्होंने अपनी शिक्षा जो है वो मुंबई यूनिवर्सिटी से पूरी की है। उन्होंने इंटीरियर डिजाइन में उसके साथ साथ हमारा जो अलग अलग यानी किसी एक ही टॉपिक को ना लेते हुए अलग अलग इससे हम डायमेंशन से कैसे उस टॉपिक को देख सकते हैं, इसके लिए उन्होंने अलग अलग शिक्षा ली है। वो उनके इंट्रोडक्शन से हमें पता चलेगा ही। मगर मैं उनको ये धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ कि इस ऐसे अलग एक टॉपिक पर, क्योंकि इस विषय को लेकर के कोई बात करता नहीं है। हम टेम्पल आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर की बात करते हैं, फोर्ट आर्किटेक्चर की बात करते हैं, बट व्हाट अबाउट द रेसिडेंशियल और आवर ओन होम्स, हमारे खुद के घर जो है, या जो केव आर्किटेक्चर से टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर से लेकर के ये सफर शुरू हुआ। इंटीरियर डिजाइन, आज इंटीरियर डिजाइनर के पोस्ट बहुत सारे होते हैं, मगर इसका इतिहास क्या है, ये कैसे डेवलप हुआ, इसका सफर कहीं कोई हमें बताता नहीं है। सो इट्स एक्चुअली वन पार्ट ऑफ आवर दिस आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चरल हेरिटेज. So now I request to Suchita Kamath madam, please start our sessions today. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, please start.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to thank Bhujang Bobde sir for giving me this opportunity. And speaking about myself, I did finished my interior designing. I did a diploma course in interior designing in the year 2000. And when I was studying, I always had, like, since my childhood, I've always been interested in ancient, how things would have been in ancient India. Or like, even now I live in Mumbai. I'm born and brought up in Mumbai, but I've always thought whichever place I go, I always think how it must be many years ago. So like this topic always has haunted me, how interior designing must have been in ancient times. And after joining Bhujang sir's sessions, I got more interested in this because like that I could relate to what I learned in my college, which is located in Dadar, Mumbai. Its name is Academy of Applied Art. I did my interior designing from there. And later, a year back, I had joined in Mumbai University for a mythology course. Basically, both these things got me interested more in this topic. And so, like, I am presenting this heritage of interior designing in ancient India. Yeah. Need for interior decoration for every person. No matter how small or big the house may be, everyone will agree that it is the only place which we try to make as comfortable and appealing as we can. Beauty adds grace and peace to the house. The art of interior designing has gained popularity over the past few decades, and most of us have heard about it. But then, if we consider the dynamic and diverse cultural background of India, one will wonder if interior designing was practiced here, or is it a purely modern Western concept? Because we hardly know about anything of the ancient times. So, it is quite natural for anyone to wonder. Interior designing and home beautification have been used and have developed as humans started using shelters. Beauty and creativity has been a part of life of humans ever since use of caves for shelter. Interior design is defined as the art and science of enhancing the interior of a space in order to create a polished and more aesthetically pleasing environment. And all of us like our houses to be beautiful, and we try to make them as beautiful as possible. So, an interior designer is someone trained to execute plans, research, coordinate, and manage decorative programs, projects with authority. The profession of interior design is varied and includes space planning, conceptual development, site inspections, creating a design which will be workable, efficient, and to the liking of the client. A lot of research has to be done for this. communicating with the clients, implementation of ideas, and of course, the execution of the desired design. Now, how man started building shelters and homes. Geography and climate of a place influence the structure and shapes of buildings, and also the building materials used are dependent on these natural factors. Since school, we have learned about how the roofs of houses should be, like where it rains more, the roof should be sloping so that the water doesn't collect. Then, where it doesn't rain much, if the roof is flat, it is better. But then there should be a slope in one direction so that the collected water drains off, and there should be proper facility for the drainage of the water. Humans have lacked natural defense mechanism which the other animals have. But with his intelligence, observation, and imitation of nature, man has not only been able to survive but also has been successful in taming other creatures. Early man started using weapons made from stone and bone to protect himself from animals. From nests and shelters of birds and animals, humans also learned the art of making shelters for themselves. Early man wandered from place to place in search of food. And this is how he got more exposed to nature and the different climatic conditions. And this finally led him somewhere to take shelter. Because like from one location to the other, there were different animals or different circumstances which he faced. This is probably when the need for community living was learned by humans, and how one person could not survive on himself or herself, but they had to live as a group or a clan. So, this is how the idea of human settlements or human groups living as a community started. These groups started living in cave shelters and later started constructing shelters from plant fibers, straw, mud, sticks, and stones. Natural materials are great insulators, less polluting, and cheap building materials. And these have whatever remains are found from the ancient past. These have been found in quite good conditions. But if we consider the present building materials, they will deteriorate very fast because they are synthetic in nature. And when natural elements affect these, they have certain chemical processes going on which break them down quite fast compared to the natural material. So the structures don't survive for that long. But in present times, due to the scarcity of construction space, their use is not popular. That is, the use of the natural materials is not popular as the structures constructed from natural materials are high maintenance and bulky. So we prefer synthesized building materials. The ancient cave shelters in India. Ancient Paleolithic cave paintings are found in the states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha. This is primarily, they could be found in other locations, but these are the main places where these cave paintings have been discovered. Though undated, these paintings could be around 30,000 to 10,000 years old, as they use similar art form of the Bhimbetka rock shelters in Bhopal. So we can judge that all of these rock paintings were done more or less in a span of about 20,000 years, which though big is still uh, quite in one certain range. In Karnataka, cave paintings are found near Badami. Odisha has the richest of rock art in eastern India, with more than 100 rock shelters with rock paintings and engravings. Geometrical symbols, dots, and lines are found along with those of animals and humans, and engravings. dating from late Paleolithic age onward. The cave dwelling artists had sense of color, shapes, and forms. These are paintings which include figures of humans, animals, geometrical shapes like squares and rectangles, wheels with spokes, various shapes and dots in colors like white, yellow, red, blue, and black. So not only they used color combinations, but also were familiar with line and form, which are elements used in interior design. Now, these are some of the rock paintings, which from which we can say that the colors are still intact and the color combinations were beautiful. These people had a sense of proportion and how they beautified, like for instance, the image on the right seems like a cave, entrance of a cave or some structure which has a panel, a decorated painted panel, and the images of two people are standing under it. The Vedas are the earliest literature which tells us about the towns in ancient India. Towns and cities were surrounded by protective walls and wooden railings. Majority of the buildings inside these fortified cities were constructed entirely from wood. Due to abundance of timber, as the land was covered with mahavanas, that is large dense forests, the epics also present beautiful picturization of these ancient cities. The craftsmanship reached very high standards during these periods. From the Rig Veda, we come to know that the divine architect Vishwakarma thought of using wood for designing the universe. What is a Shastra? We always hear about the word Shastras, or it is said in the Shastras, or some mention of the word Shastra some way or the other. So, what exactly is a Shastra? The word Shastra is derived from the Sanskrit root Shas, which means to teach, instruct, rule, or govern, to tell, communicate, or to inform. From it are derived words like shasan, meaning discipline, rule, or government. Also, from shas are derived shastra, which means an order or command, a rule or precept. These include sacred precepts and rules and sacred books or scriptures or any department of knowledge and science. The process of development of Indian sciences started thousands of years ago. We come across many references of cosmic distances, medicine, and various branches of science in many ancient sacred books, in stotras and shlokas, that is, hymns. Our ancestors had detailed knowledge about various shastras. Development of science in ancient India has been the work of various learned men, our rishis who were great scientists. In India, the art and science of building construction and beautification is also as ancient as any other discipline. The word Shastra means a command, an order, a sacred perspective or rule, sacred book or scripture. So then is Vastu Shastra a sacred book? Yes, it is. And not just that, it is mentioned in many other ancient books, ranging from Vedic literature to Agamas, Puranas, Sutras, Samhitas, epics, and other treatises have many chapters having detailed explanation of Vastu Shastra. In India, the science of architecture and interior design is ancient and vast. It is compiled into technical manuals developed by Sthapatis, who were master architects. So interior designing in India it started very long ago, and since it started at a very early stage, uh, and the people were very enthusiastic, intelligent in learning various techniques and ways. They developed these arts and traditions to a very great level. According to Manushalaya Chandrika, in the construction of houses, four very efficient professionals have been mentioned to be appointed for the job: Stapati, Sutragrahi, Takshaka, and Vardhaki. Now, who is the Stapati? Stapati. Stapatis are only those craftsmen who were well versed with the various shastras of Griha Nirman worked as Stapati. The Stapati was an efficient and skilled person, and the construction, the execution of the job, and finishing of it was entirely dependent on a Stapati. And the skills of the Stapati were fully used because the people of ancient times were very dedicated, and they like to excel not only in whatever the contemporary works, but each person tried to do better than what he had done previously. He had to be always alert and stable minded, pure at heart, pious and not jealous, malicious or hateful in nature, because this would affect his work. Had he been a jealous person or malicious and he was working for a very rich person, which generally was the case, it was only the wealthy people who could employ, who could build such beautiful structures. So if the Stapati was a jealous person, then he would not be able to give his best in his job. Now, these qualities were specified as they would affect his work. In his work, he was assisted by Sutragrahi, Takshaka, and Vardhaki. Sutragrahi. Sutragrahi should have thoughts similar as those of the Stapati and should respect the Stapati's decisions and obey him. Sutragrahi could be a close associate of the Stapati, preferably his son or a student. He should be good at taking measures with a measuring thread, which was called the sutra, at cutting and smoothing of the material with minimal wastage. Now, even if the Sutragrahi was the second in charge, there would be workers under him, and they would be doing the cutting, but the finishing, or if anything went wrong, the Sutragrahi was responsible, and he would have to he himself, if he did not know how to execute the job, then how he would order or command his co-workers. And had the Sutragrahi been the son, because the tradition in India, the arts and the traditions, the traits, all the traits were practiced in such a way that they were inherited from the first generation to the next, from the father to the son, and the son passed it on to his son, and so it went on. And as they excelled, they learned skills from their previous generations, because like they were in the same family, so they would uh, share their secrets also, or like they would develop better skills learning with their father from a young age. The boy would learn more skills because he had already seen his father work. So he would be able to understand the working system in a better way. Or even if it was a student, he would follow his guru out of respect and love for his guru. So that is how the Sutragrahi's work uh, went on. Takshaka. He should have pleasant temperament as his mood affected the co-workers and also his work. Vardhaki, the word Vardhaki means the carpenter in Sanskrit, and the carpenter must be good at cutting and binding materials and pieces together. Many terms were used to denote a house, of which Griha, Agra, and Shala were often used. Vastu Kshama Vidhi, that is appeasement of the land before construction of a house, was done after selecting a suitable land having an eastward slope so that the water drained off properly. It was a practice of using such a soil for house construction where the water would flow from all directions towards the center. But it should not collect here and move in a circular path before draining off from the eastern direction. It did not collect at the center due to a slight raised portion here. So the water would circle around this raised little mound, and then it would, or a little surface which was raised above the general contour of the land, and it would move, and if it moved in the eastern direction while draining out, this land was considered the best. Another feature of the land was that a, a hole would be dug at a certain to a certain depth, and water would be poured in, and the person inspecting would walk a certain number of footsteps in one direction and come back. And if he came back and saw that all the water drained out, that means that this soil was good, because if the water stagnates, then the soil will soften. If it drained out, that means the structure which will get constructed over it will stay quite dry, and since the foundation would remain dry, uh, the danger of the building collapsing or the house collapsing was avoided. This raised portion would be the most suitable location for the constructions. Since it is slightly raised, the danger and damage due to floods was prevented. This would also make the structure long lasting. Houses and cities of Indus Valley civilization. Excavations have revealed parts of fortification walls, well planned drainage system, and houses, and also provision of water tanks and reservoirs for good water management. It has been revealed that many cities like Mohenjo-daro, Kalibangan, etc., had a raised mound with a fort or citadel which would lie on the west, and the lower town would be in the east. In some cities, such as Lothal, the citadel was not built on a raised mound but was separated from the remaining town by a brick wall. Harappan houses were of different sizes, had many rooms, kitchens with soak pits. Now, these soak pits were equivalent to the sinks of today. And one special feature was that when the cleaning of the utensils was done, the residue collected in the soak pit. That is why it was called a soak pit, so that the clear water would drain out. The water used for cleaning the utensils would drain out, whereas the solid waste particles would remain in the soak pit, and those would be cleared later. Bedrooms, storerooms, etc., a courtyard. So these were the other features of the house. Some of the houses were double-storied with staircases leading to the above floors. The floors above also had toilets that had drains built inside walls that ended just above the street drains. The floors were either tiled or plastered with bitumen, or houses of the poor sections of the society had beaten earth covered with cow dung plaster. These were built parallel to roads. So the houses were built parallel to roads. This was basically to have an alignment with the road, so that for the circulation of the wind and for the drainage system. There were manholes with covers present at regular intervals for cleaning. For cleaning, if there was a choke up, or if the drains needed cleaning, otherwise they would overflow. They emptied into brick culverts, and sewage water was drained outside the city at some distance from its limits. So good care was taken, so that of the sanitation, so that people could live a very good life and a very healthy life. The houses and other buildings were plain and without much interior decoration. Stone was not used as a building material. Instead, bricks, which were the burnt bricks or sun-dried bricks, were used, indicating severity of rainfall in this region in ancient times. Burnt bricks were used in construction, were uniform in dimensions. The houses did not have exterior windows for safety, but an open courtyard in the center. Their furniture and other aspects of interior design. Large earthen pots were used for storage. Also, deep recesses in the walls may have been made so that they would be fitted with wooden shelves and used for storage. The walls were provided with stands for placing water jugs and other items. Openable large wooden boxes were used for storage purpose. So as we can see in the image, the utensils, the jugs and the other earthenware is beautifully painted. So this speaks about their creativity and how good they were, how skilled they were. And the paintings were also done in good proportion, having symmetry and form and various other aspects of art. The people of the Indus Valley civilization used furniture like beds and chairs. Some of the chairs had legs carved like a bull's legs. Clay models of couches have also been found. Raised kitchen platforms with facility for fuel storage have been found. Ancient references of the art of construction and decoration of buildings in Vedic and post Vedic period. So, the next period we learn about is the Vedic period. So, what happened here? References are also found in Buddhist literature of buildings constructed on the basis of Vastu Shastra. The Jatakas contain references to individual buildings. Lord Buddha is said to have delivered discourses on architecture and even told his disciples that supervising the construction of a building was one of the duties of the order. Many Puranas, such as Skanda Puran, Agni Puran, Matsya Puran, Narad Puran, Vayu Puran, Brahmanda Puran, and Linga Puran, have many chapters with details on Vastu Shastra, the ancient Indian art of building construction and decoration. In the Mahabharata, reference is made of a number of houses that were built for the kings, who were invited to Indraprastha for the Rajasuya Yajna of King Yudhishthir. Sage Vyas says that these houses were as high as the peaks of Kailash mountains, perhaps meaning that they stood tall and majestic. The houses were free from obstructions, had compounds with high walls, their doors were of uniform height, and inlaid with numerous ornamentations and precious stones. Houses during the Vedic period. The weaker sections of society lived in huts made from straw, slender uniform branches, or strips of wood matted together and plastered with mud. So the mud plaster provided the strengthening, and the branches or the strips of wood acted as the skeletal material. Some families who were rich lived in wooden houses. Such houses comprised of rooms for various purposes like sitting room, bedroom, rooms for women, room for worship, where the Yajna Bhumi was located, and the houses were spacious with good ventilation and natural light. These houses had courtyards. There were structures built for both residences and for conducting rituals. Udumbar wood pillars, uh, the Udumbar wood pillar was erected in the middle of the structure, as the Vedic Aryans believed the Udumbar tree to be life giver, life sap, The center of was at the center of the construction, and that bore the this main pillar bore the entire weight of the structure, supported by the other pillars. Be it residential or for sacrifices, was an important part as it was believed to be identical with the axis mundi, that is considered to be the navel of the earth. Some of the sheds served as shelters for the sacrifice performing priests. These shelters too had specifications for construction as mentioned in the various sutras and the samhitas, formulae or specifications, and the various texts. There are texts which tell us about hymns recited during the tying and untying of huts. So, a lot of rituals, a lot of prayers were done while the structure was being erected and when it was demolished. There were certain methods adopted for the selection of a site for construction of a house. A lot of care was taken in this respect. After all, the well being of the members living in it depended on the vastu, which is the house. Water flow played a key role in this. Considering the amount of rainfall India receives, the base of any house or even a hut had to be firm for it to survive the harsh weather conditions. A specific number of foundation holes were dug, which were to be knee deep for a strong foundation. There were tests for soil to check drainage capability. If water drained off quickly, the soil was considered best. Either the Udumbar wood posts were placed directly inside these uh, holes, or first a stone block was placed over which the post was erected. So, like as I have earlier mentioned about the test for checking the uh, quality of the soil, so that is given over here. The posts in the southern direction were inserted first, and later those to the north were placed. The middle beam or post had two rafters placed above it at its center, so that the load of the entire structure would be borne by this and carried by these rafters uniformly. The main entrance door was preferably in the east, or it could be to the south or north, but never to the west. Doors had door fasteners known as dwar pidhana. The door panels, dwar kapat, which were two in number, and the bolt was called dwar kantaka. The various rooms, like the room for the ladies of the house, the bedrooms, the meeting room for the master of the house, the kitchen, and the prayer room, were positioned between the posts as specified in texts. So everything would be according to the text which gave this information, which were the store of all the knowledge, and nobody tried to alter them because they were scientific explanations, which were of course given in the form of verses, but these verses were understood better by the people living in those ages. The roof was thatched. It was better if a house had a platform running along the outer face of all sides of the house. The bathing hut was outside and was an enclosed structure with mats. Since the above description is of the houses of wealthy people, there was also a structure designed to keep two chariots. The entire plot had a compound with wooden posts, and a compound was a must. Reasons for loss of Indian palaces. Now, after the houses, we come to palaces. Palaces were the grand residences of kings, as we all know. So now let us study about why Indian palaces have not survived. So, like we speak about long lasting material, but why they have not survived. Palaces were known as prasadas, Raj Bhavan, Raj Nivesh, Raj Griha, Antapur, etc. The word prasada is generally used for palace in the Puranas. The palaces of the kings of ancient times have not survived the tests of time. The sites of the royal residences were lost due to political disturbances and wars, extinction of various dynasties, and natural calamities. Many of them were looted and plundered and demolished. These are the reasons why we do not have the fortune to see them. But due to the vastness of our traditional literature and literary works, we find references of various palaces in the Ramayana, Mahabharata, books like Banabhatta's Harsha Charitra and Kadambari, and many other famous books. Even the works of Kalidas speak a lot about the palaces and other buildings and how beautifully they were made, the beautification part of it. And many other authors and poets have composed and written on these beautiful interiors. How were these palaces? A palace was a symbol of power, and its structure was a representation of the king's might. Palaces were sprawling structures with many subsidiary buildings. They were many storied buildings with many pillars and were crowned with domes. So the majesty of the palace was enhanced by these domes, which made it look um, much larger and more splendid. There are references of palaces with of a palace with 1,000 columns in the Ramayana. The relief work on panels at Sanchi have some palaces and palace interiors on them. So from many of these relief works in stone, we come to know about the structures of the houses and the palaces. Not only this, about the various other aspects of interior design if we closely observe these uh, structures individually. These are also very informative about the residences of kings and members of the royal family. And they also speak about the daily life of the people and many other aspects of the lives of the people, the dressing sense, the ornaments they wore. So that again speaks about the arts and the aesthetics of the people of those times. Moreover, since the palace, being the residence of the king, who was the head of the judicial system of the kingdom, the judicial responsibilities were conducted from the palace to his royal court. So, apart from having domestic activities, it was also the center for judicial activities. Thus, apart from the king's residence, which was the largest, many other buildings were designed around the palace. So, why these buildings or other residences were constructed around the palace? So that all the people helping the king, like the ministers, the princes, and the Raj Purohit, they would be around the king, and that would save the time of transportation. Other residences were in diminishing dimensions to it, obviously because the king was the supreme head of his territory, so he had to have a house bigger than the others. So that is why the palace was the largest structure, and other palaces or other buildings reduced in size according to the rank and the position of the person. Many other buildings were designed around the palace. Other residences were in diminishing order to it, like the residence of Yuvraj was smaller in size to that of the king's palace. Now, the Yuvraj is the king to be, so his house was not was big, but not as big as the king's palace. Smaller than the house of the Yuvraj, the smaller than this were the palaces of the younger princes, followed in reducing size by the houses of commander in chief, prime minister's house. Smaller in dimension to this were the houses of other ministers, and then were those of the other workers as per rank. So there were various other people apart from the judiciary who helped the king and who were needed for the maintenance of these royal houses. So they also lived around the palace. And having so many structures around the palace, that provided more security in a sense for the king. It was not in an isolated place. The location of various structures in and around the king's palace. The royal kitchen should be to the southeast and must have good ventilation, because there shouldn't be any smells left in the kitchen that would create unpleasantness. There were to be in the northeast a room to store perfumes and flowers. The storeroom was to be in the north direction, the cowshed in the northwest. There were to be bathrooms in the west direction. It was to be constructed with windows. Again, the windows provided good air circulation. A separate room for storing sacrificial twigs, fuel, etc., was to be to the southwest. Another special room for the guests was in the south. It would be designed with care and beauty, because these were the guests of of the royal family. So they needed a room which was really beautiful. In this room, there was furniture like bed, seats, dressing table, water pots, arrangement for lighting up the room when darkness set in. So this lighting was again in the form of lamps and diyas, the earthenware, or it could be uh, precious metals. All the special rooms would be decorated with fresco paintings, tapestry, beautiful sculpture, and pottery, etc. Now, the wall paintings are the fresco paintings. Tapestry is done with weaving the painting with different color threads. So it was more of a woven design, or some ornamental work done with threads and woven like cloth. Special attention to the color schemes, curtains, and drapes, and the scents to create a pleasant atmosphere, with fixtures and arrangements for lamps was provided. The palace, after all, spoke of creativity of the maker. It was a representation of grandeur and majesty of the king. Location of the palaces. All Shilpa texts unanimously state that the palace must be located in the heart of the city, that is, centrally located. In the opinion of Chanakya, palace had to be constructed at the center of the fortified city. He prescribed that the palace must occupy one-ninth the total area of the fortified city or the town, and be positioned slightly to the north. He also specified that the king's palace must be constructed on firm ground to withstand forces causing weakening of structure. It was to face north or to the east. The Puranic mention of palaces. The palace was to be constructed on a square plot with a grid of 64 squares. In the Matsya Puran, it is stated that the king's palace should be the most beautiful structure, surrounded by greenery provided by grass lawns and trees. There must be residences of princes and a large number of other royal and brave courtiers, since the well being of the king is the well being of the entire kingdom. So, the brave courtiers, the word brave is mentioned because if there were people who were cowards, they would run away. And if suppose there was an attack on the king's palace, that would cause some danger to the king. So before reaching the king, the enemy had to fight the people around in the worst situations. The palace should have an atmosphere of happiness. It must be surrounded by fragrant flowers and sweet fruit orchards. This brings in the concept of landscape designing in use since ancient times. The Matsya Puran also states that the palace of the king must be beautiful, elegant, a lofty structure, well supplied with water. The treasury should be in the southern part of the palace. Beyond this, further south should be the elephant yard with its entrance to the east or north. The weaponry should be to the southeast. The Raj Purohits, that is the palace priest's house, to the left side of the king's palace. Now, coming to the topic of Vastu Shastra, I will not go much in detail, but just a little brief about the topic because we have a time constraint. Vastu Shastra. The rituals and practices related with architecture and designing are stated in the various works on Vastu Shastra and their later compilations till 15th CE. Griha Sutras, that is, rules of Vedic domestic ceremonies, the Vedas, the Puranas, Agamas, Tantras. There are many Vedic hymns which are related to construction. All this information gives a clear idea that these designing basic based on scientific practices of Vastu Shastra are synthesis and result of many years of research and practice. So after so many years of practicing these principles, uh, the the people who practice them, who develop more scientific and better methods which were related to the vastu of that particular plot or that particular house. The basic objective was that a clean and pure environment was required for any construction to give favorable results for the overall well-being of the users of a particular construction. The Rig Veda, which has two chapters in the seventh mandala, states a hymn for the invocation of the Vastochpati. The Vastoshpati is the lord of the Vastu. The Vastoshpati as a deity who presides over the foundation of the house. It is believed that Vastoshpati was an epithet of Indra because in the Vedic period, Indra had a very high position. Indra, who had a supreme position in the Vedic period. But gradually, the worship of Vastu Purush or Vastu Nara gained popularity. So, with passage of time, Indra lost his importance and people started worshipping other deities and other gods. And slowly, the the deity related or the Vastu Purush who ruled over a particular Vastu gained more importance and he started being worshipped. Now, story of the birth of Vastu Purush. Now, we all always hear about the Vastu Purush. I'm sure people have heard. So let's listen to the story of his birth. The demon Andhakasur had created a lot of troubles for the rishis and was killing many of them. Lord Shiva fought this demon. The war went on for many years. The tired Shiva started sweating profusely. So, since the war was so long, Shiva grew a little uh, weary, tired because of the constant fight. And as the drops of sweat fell on the soil, and he started sweating. So the drops of sweat fell on the soil, and a cruel looking, horrifying child was born from the sweat. He drank all of Andhakasura's blood and killed him. But his hunger could not be appeased. He grew at an alarming speed, consuming all that he came across, eating all living beings and destroying nature. So he not only consumed the animals and people and birds, but he also started eating up the trees and whatever came his way. He was so hungry. The five elements of nature were disturbed by this act of the growing demonic child, as he had by then covered almost the entire earth's surface. This was disturbing even to the gods watching from heaven, and they went to Lord Brahma for help. Probably because the entire earth would get destroyed, and then after eating up everything on the earth's surface, what next? So then he would probably move to the upper realms and start troubling the gods. So Lord Brahma fought this swift growing demon and beat him. Then Brahma ordered 45 gods to sit on him, pinning him down to the ground, the present position in which he is believed to be lying even today. So the gods sat on the body of this demon and held him to the ground and did not allow him to move. And his head, he faces down, so he cannot. He his vision is to the ground and not up. The demon begged mercy of Brahma. Brahma declared that the demon would be then onwards known as Vastu Purush or Vastu Nara or Vastu Devta, and that he would bless with happiness and peace those who would offer him prayers. Lord Brahma commanded that all buildings to be constructed in a manner such that both the presiding deities and the Vastu Purush are happy and comfortable. If the people failed, then the Vastu Purush was given the authority by Lord Brahma to curse and trouble them. Hearing this, the Vastu Purush happily agreed to obey Brahma and stay in the assigned position because he was basically demonic in nature, and what he wanted was attention, and he also wanted to be there to live. So if he did not obey the Lord Brahma, who is the supreme being, then he would get himself in danger. And since he got the chance of punishing those who did not worship him, so in a way, if they did not worship him, um, uh, they would uh, they would be in a position to be cursed by him or troubled by him. So that gave the Vastu Purush some pleasure, probably. The Vastu Purush Mandal. Vastu Purush, the Vastu means the environment, nature, or matter which is in existence. Purusha means energy, vigor, or soul. A mandala means an astrological chart in which mandal is a Sanskrit word. And a mandala means an astrological chart which is a geometric configuration of symbols. The Vastu Purush mandal is square in shape. More precisely, it is a grid. So as we can see in the diagram, it is a grid with the representation of the Vastu Purush in the form of a man, and he is facing down. In various spiritual traditions, mandalas are beneficial for helping in focusing attention to provide spiritual guidance for creation of a consecrated place and as an aid to meditation and trance induction on a person. It represents deities and incorporates their ambience, thus, it is auspicious. So, any mandala is an auspicious formation. The Vastu Vidhan states that the Vastu Purush Mandala is a yantra, which is a yantra is a diagram, and the Rupa, that is the form of the Vastu Purush. It is also stated that those with appropriate knowledge of the Sharira, that is the body of the Vastu Purush, that is the positioning of each limb and his entire body, and his Sharir Yantra, that is bodily device, can attain best results in the construction. The Vastu Purush is confined to the Vastu Mandala and is drawn in the 64 squares of the mandalas. The image is of a man with his head to the northeast, legs to the southwest. His left hand is placed in the southeast and his right hand in the northwest directions, respectively. I will show you the slide again here. There are 45 deities who preside over the mandalas, even if the grid of the mandala increases or decreases. Brahma, who is the creator of the universe, occupies the central position, which again in this diagram we can see it is represented by the yellow dot. That is the Brahmastan. The Brahmastan is important as it is associated with Brahma, the Supreme. So Brahma is the creator and he is the supreme being. The entire universe is in motion because of the existence of Brahma. Brahma's inevitable law causes the fire to burn, the sun to shine, Indra to cause rain, that is Parjanya, Vayu, the lord of breath, and Yama, the lord of death, all proceed with their assigned duties. His form does not exist within the range of human vision, and nobody can see him with the eyes. The Brahmastan is considered the nucleus or the center of any Vastu of the mandala, usually occupies 4 squares in the Manduka, that is 64 squares. So it is the grid with 64 squares. Here the Brahmastan occupies 4 central squares, 9 squares in the Paramasika, which is made of 81 squares. So of these 9 central squares are occupied by the Brahmastan. That is the position of Lord Brahma. The Brahmastan radiates energy towards the other padas. The 12 Adityas, which are the forms of the sun, are the inner deities. And these are surrounded by other deities in a certain fixed order. These Adityas surround the Brahmastan. They are placed according to the time and role of each. Uh, the numerous invasions and subjugations of India by foreign rulers caused this ancient Vedic science of architecture to fade. So, Vastu Shastra is no more practiced the way it used to be in ancient times. It is not in its glory as it was before. So, this is because of the numerous invasions which we faced as a nation, and every ruler left his mark. So Vastu Shastra somewhere was left behind, and people stopped following the practices the way it was done previously during the Vedic period. Vedic traditions and Vastu Shilpa Shastra faced such a setback as they were ridiculed and considered as superstition. But in the past few decades, the significance of the genius of our ancient arts and traditions is making a gradual comeback by the efforts of some enthusiastic scholars. And these scholars are uh, reviving this ancient tradition. But the period of shunning of our traditions has cost us dearly. Almost all of the contemporary buildings, including many temples, are built without the knowledge of Vastu Shilpa Shastra. This results in the users and residents suffering consequences like financial losses, poor health, reduced mental peace, and happiness. So, not only the houses which are built other than the principles of Vastu Shastra, according to the modern techniques, and people have left aside the ancient Shastra, saying that it is old fashioned and it is just a superstition. But it is even the temples. Like if the study of temples is so vast and so deep that the stone which was used had to be of a particular type. The sound by ring, the be, tapping on the stone spoke about what kind of a stone it was, and a particular stone was used for uh, structuring, for making the idol from that stone. Any stone, just pick a stone and create statue from it, some idol of some god. That does not happen. And now, since the people are forgetting about this ancient shastra, we do not find temples as powerful as they should have, or as they would have had we been practicing Vastu Shastra in its true forms. Because there are various aspects. Making using the stone for the fashioning of the idol is just one. There are many other aspects which, if not followed, it will not give good results, or it will not give us results as we desire. The treatise that brings together all the varied topics under Vastu Shastra is compiled into 70 chapters and titled as Manasara Vastu Shastra. Vastu Vidya or Vastu Shastra is so comprehensive and broad in its discourses that it is coexistent with the Shilpa Shastras. The Samarangan Sutradhar gives information of Ayadi, a group of 6 formulas, which are Aya, Vyaya, Risha, Yoni, and Varatithi, in accordance with which the structure should be built. The Vedic literature frequently mentions villages or gramas and towns, puras, of which the pur is often mentioned in the Rig Veda. The city planning and different names of village types according to construction material used for the houses in it or use of the settlement was specified. Even the construction, the way the planning was done, how each house was positioned, or how a certain group of houses was positioned, that also gave the name to the cities. Rajdhani. Rajdhani had the palace of the king. So it was a city which had the palace of the king in it. Patan was a city where the king had his holiday home. Karawat was a city similar to all in all other respects to the Rajdhani, but the king would not stay there. Nigam, a town smaller than Karawat. So the Nigam was a town which was smaller in size, and the number of people living in it were lesser than those of a Karawat. Grama was smaller in size than the Nigam. Uttabhidhana, a town where trade was carried out, thus it was a business center. Utika, a tribal village where the houses were made from leaves, branches, grass, etc. A Gram Pramukh, that is the village headman, was in charge of the Putika. Palika was a village smaller in size to the Putika. Cities, towns, and villages had specific number of residents. Overcrowding of settlements was not permitted, and in such a case, that means if overcrowding had started in a particular town or a village, then in that case, a new settlement would be established under the specifications of Vastu Shastra. And only after constructing all the houses of that new location, and after the appropriate worship and the pujas performed, would the people go to live in these new settlements. From the Vedic texts, it is quite clear that the writers of these verses knew about fortification, villages, towns, forts, carved stones, stone built houses, and brick structures. The basics of architecture were passed on from generation to generation, most likely through oral traditions of memorization. Houses should have living rooms, resting rooms, storerooms, halls for services, halls attached to bathrooms, closet rooms, cloisters, open-faced mandapas, and ponds. The inner chambers are to be divided into three parts: square halls, Shivika Garbha, rectangular halls, Nalika Garbha, and dining halls, Harmya Garbha. Verandas or alindas were essential for these houses and were also present in prasada or multi-storied houses. So a multi-story houses which were referred to as a veranda supported by pillars with elephant heads. Details of doors, windows, stairs, rooms, and screens and windows with screens on them. And seven-storied buildings, these were known as Vimanas, Satyabhumika Prasada, or they were also known as Vimanas, are frequently found in various Buddhist texts. There is another very interesting structure mentioned in the Vinaya texts. How colors enhance the beauty of a Vastu. In India, beautiful painted remains can be found from prehistoric times. These were essentially done in sandstone caves, and later, as many techniques were developed, these were methodically used. Ancient texts describe the technique of preparation of surface for painting using different types of clays and soils. So these clays and soils would be plastered onto the uneven stone surface, and a smooth uh, layer would be created, a smooth surface would be created on which the painting could be done without any disturbance. Also, lime or burnt and powdered conch shells or white earth with very high calcium content was used. This was according to availability of material according to region. These ancient texts give elaborate information of ingredients and steps to follow while preparation of surface and making colors. Paintings of later periods are either on mud or lime mortar base. The pigments used were inorganic materials like red ochre, ochre yellow, green earth, lapis lazuli, carbon black, and lime got by finely grinding shells. Organic binding resins were used. The recipe for the pigments used in India from prehistoric times was so good and time tested that they did not change till the coming of the Mughals. The outlines were drawn by using pigments like carbon black or red ochre. The mud mortar was used in varying thickness so that the surface was properly and smoothly leveled. This thickness could be from a few millimeters to many inches. So if the surface was not even, it had to be evened out. So there would be some parts which would be projecting where the plaster required was very thin, and some parts which were a little bit indented or the surface had gone in, caved in a little bit. So there, the plaster, the size, the thickness of the plaster would be more. So it went to some inches also. Ancient artists have done paintings in caves with beautiful human figures, geometrical designs, and animal figures. The Indian artists of ancient India were highly skilled, and the paintings of Ajanta caves are painted in such a manner that they have three-dimensional effect. All the pigments were locally available materials, including green, which was got from basaltic rock. The technique of painting is purely tempera, and glue was used as binding material. Unlike fresco painting, the painting technique in India is either tempera or secco. So these are two different techniques used for painting on the wall surfaces, and animal glue was used as binding medium for painting. Vajralepa glue was made from the decoction of animal skins or keratinous materials obtained from hooves was mixed with certain prescribed resinous plant extracts, which were used to cover the surface as protective layer. So Vajralep was a very famous form of glue which was used, and it was very reliable and very popular. Dyes and pigments are coloring materials. They differ in composition and technique of use. Natural dyes are made from organic matter soluble in water. On the other hand, pigments are got from inorganic matter and do not dissolve in water. So, some other solute has to be used so that these substances, these pigments dissolve in that. So since they are not soluble, they don't dissolve in water. Dyeing was done in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India since 3000 BC. Dyes were got from juices of fruits, flowers, roots, and barks of trees, and from animals and minerals. Colors like red, yellow, blue, black were produced from various sources. The madder plant roots and insects like lac, cochineal, curmins produced red, turmeric, saf- safflower, saffron, and opiment, that is a mineral, were used to produce yellow. Indigo for blue, gall black from insect called gall. In India, dye production and use was from pre-Vedic and Vedic periods. And coloring properties of vegetable substances can be found in the Atharva Veda. Ancient India was famous for growth and production of best quality dyes and was known as the largest dye manufacturing country. How modern elements of interior design were in use in ancient India. So, the modern elements which are popular in design, in interior design, are color, form, light, line, pattern, texture, and space. So, how these were they used in India in ancient times? Yes, definitely. From so many examples, we can judge that and understand that these definitely were used. So, if we think of these aspects of interior designing in ancient India, it is but natural for one to think that since more than 2000 years ago, were people aesthetically inclined, we might end up assuming that there was no beautification, no furniture in use in ancient India. But surprisingly, this was not the case because we don't come across much of all these aspects of interior designing in India. It's like nothing much is available, but still they did exist. If we take a look at the sculptures, pottery, and excavated remains of the findings of the past, we learn that all elements of modern interior design were in use in ancient India. Vastu Shastra, the traditional Indian science of designing, was practiced meticulously throughout what was known as Brihad Bharat. India and in India, art and religion have always gone hand in hand. Since religion has been a part and parcel of life of Indian people, whose day began and ended with prayers. It is a pity that just some great temples in dilapidated state have survived the ravages of time. And many of these have been restored now, but these two provide a treasure trove. So all these temples and all these structures provide us with a vast treasure of information about the high standards of interior design of the glorious past of India. Temples and palaces of kings of any kingdom were the most beautiful structure of the land. So we can judge the high quality of life and wealth in ancient times. Because the temples,
So just I want request that
yes,
because
sir.
of this is too much and such a great information we have. If we will focus at the last the tools and techniques because
Yes,
of
sir.
our this time.
Yes, sir.
the last two things which are most important we want to know, the
Yeah.
tools and techniques.
Sir, also could I just
So
I will show the slides, but could I just add a little bit about the different furniture in use? Can I just speak in a minute?
yeah, yes, okay. Is
Yes.
just speedily
Yes,
because
sir. Sorry.
we'll organize one course regarding this. So
Yes, sir.
in
Sure, sir.
vast we will discuss all the points in that our course also. So
Yes, sir.
please go to the sessions because we want to know the tools and techniques which was used in this time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, colors is another aspect. You can read it. Sorry, I cannot explain anything about this because of the time constraint. Lighting and texture. Materials used in ancient India. I will like to add just one point that during the rule of the Mauryan dynasty, stone was used in making columns and for decorating works like statues, inscriptions, and stambhas. This happened more during Ashoka's rule, were made use of it for proclaiming and propagating the message of Dhamma. And the Maya, the in the Mayamat or the of the Maya Sura, specifications of the material to be used for house construction are mud, bricks, limestone, wood, various metals, and precious stones. So the references of woodcraft are found, which were found in ancient Indian literature, are as follows. Now, when we speak, there were thrones. Now, the furniture which was produced in this period can be categorized into thrones for the king and the queen. There were small and large thrones. There was wheeled furniture, like there were wheelchairs for the disabled. Then there were wicker stands for storing household items. Footstools which were placed under the throne so that the king would relax his feet because the throne was at a great height. Boxes and wooden boxes for especially jewelry and for storing betel nuts, and these were finely crafted. There were chairs, seats, and vetrasan. Vetrasan is the stools which are made from cane. So these were very popular, and Vetrasans were used by all classes, or even not just the royal families and the other rich people, but even the poor people could afford these. So probably they were made in different styles and different designs, and these were very popular among the entire communities. Then there were tables, though they were not much in use, but there were low height tables where a person could squat on the floor and use the table. Bedsteads and other wooden objects like boats and ships and carts. We know about lot of these structures in use in ancient times. Now coming to the techniques, techniques of wood carving have been practiced in India since very ancient times. In constructing palaces, temples, and houses, wood was the main raw material used, as these were mostly constructed in perishable wood, and fortunately, very few wooden structures have survived for us to know about the superior workmanship of ancient times. So, though very few have survived, but still, whatever has survived, we get a lot of information about the ancient times and how the techniques were developed and what kind of techniques were in use in crafting these items. A careful examination of the stone carvings of ancient period, however, shows that the techniques of wood carving were later used for stone carving. So the same techniques which were used previously for wood carving, the stone is a much harder material, and of these, granite is the strongest. But still, there are exemplary works which have very beautiful, intricate designs carved on these stones. So looking at them, nobody will be able to judge the efforts which these people went through while carving them. Tools. The main tools used by the wood carvers can be listed as under: hand saw, plane, that is the planer, chisel, and drilling equipments are used for preliminary cutting works and preparing pieces of wood to be carved. So drilling was not done by machines, but it was some technique devised by the carpenters and the sculptors who used these very fine drills, even some of very few millimeters in dimension, in diameter. Such fine drilling work was done. The carver used large number of chisels, gauges, and punches of various sizes and shapes, worked with the help of mallet and wood used to strike the chisel for carving minute details such as rounding the edges. So rounding of edges is very essential so that somebody doesn't go and hurt themselves. Cutting timber and also rounding gives a very good finished appearance to the eyes. When we view any object which has jagged and sharp edges, it looks very unpleasant. But if the curves, the corners are rounded, it gives a softer appearance. Cutting timber into pieces, making holes, and for other purposes. So a lot of tools were used. To curve the subtle items like eyes, ears, nose, lips, locks, that is the hair, the locks of hair, etc. Many tools were used. In in a statue, the fine, sharper, and more tiny tools were used. So these, since these were very delicate pieces, eyes speak a lot. They tell us about the feelings and the thoughts going on in a person's mind. So these are kind of like the windows to the soul. So eyes, ears, nose, which again, if a little bit damage is caused, it will spoil the entire beauty of the face. So these needed to be carved very cautiously and with very great care and proper tools. In a statue, the fine, sharper, and more tiny tools were used. The tools used in sandalwood carving mainly consisted of a saw, a plane, a mallet, a sharp blade, and a chisel. There has not been any appreciable change during the long span of 5,000 years in Indian history in respect of furniture. So, if we go by the Indian forms, I'm not speaking about the Western interior designing structures, but if we speak about the Indian form of interior designing, it has not gone much of change. Though amalgamation, fusions have taken place, but the basic structures have remained the same over these thousands of years. In majority of the cases, the older shapes are continuing. It has taken a long time to incorporate Western elements into our traditional cultural patterns. Leather was also used in various ways. Numerous references to leather objects made of various kinds of skin found in Vedic and post Vedic literature have been made. So, with this, we come to the end of our session. I'm very sorry I took a much longer time than I should have. And thank you all. There will be another series, as Sir mentioned, there will be a series of lectures based on interior designing. Thank you.
So thanks a lot. I'm very sorry. It's actually from last
It took me
one
much
and a half
longer
hour you
time.
are presenting the session so good, and I really ask sorry that this is a wonderful journey of our this ancient India's this interior design part, but only because of this time lag, I'm asking sorry to you. I want to say all the
I am
participants
very
that
sorry, sir, to you and
यस
all the
नो
other
इट्स ओके
participants also
क्योंकि
for
आपने
taking
आपने
so much
इतना
time.
मेहनत से ये सारा कलेक्ट किया है और आप ज्यादा से ज्यादा देना चाहते हैं, ये तो हम सभी का ये है, क्योंकि हम चाहते ये है कि ज्यादा से ज्यादा सभी के पास पहुंचे। आई रिक्वेस्ट टू ऑल द पार्टिसिपेंट दैट जो मैडम ने आज यहाँ पर कहने की कोशिश की है, जो बताना हमें चाहा है, इसका एक वाइड कैलिडोस्कोप है, एक कंप्लीट वाइड। उन्होंने तो सिर्फ एंसेंट का पार्ट रखा है, एंसेंट, मिडिवल, मॉडर्न, हाउ टू डेवलप दिस ऑल दिस थिंग्स। तो इसके बारे में एक कोर्स हमने डिजाइन किया है और जल्दी हम उसके बारे में जो है हमारे ग्रुप में जानकारी शेयर करेंगे। सो आई रिक्वेस्ट दैट दोज हु आर मोर इंटरेस्टेड इन दिस पार्ट, प्लीज वेलकम फॉर दैट कोर्स आल्सो। और एक बात को हमें ध्यान रखना है कि जो इन्होंने जैसे कहा, ये पूरे सेशन का मैं सिर्फ कंक्लूड करना चाहता हूँ इन फ्यू लाइंस। द फर्स्ट थिंग इज दैट उन्होंने सबसे शुरू में ये बताया कि जितना ज्यादा से ज्यादा एज मच एज पॉसिबल यूज द नेचुरल मटेरियल। और जैसे उन्होंने कहा कि हमें फिर भी पैलेसेस ज्यादा नहीं दिखाई देते, इसका कारण क्या है? बिकॉज दे यूज द मटेरियल नेचर से अलग करके क्यों ना हो, मगर उन्होंने स्टोन को, पिलर्स को यूज किया। बट मैं एक ही बात में इसको समराइज करता हूँ कि हमें केव्स ज्यादा दिखाई देते हैं, पैलेसेस बहुत कम दिखाई देते हैं। व्हाई? Because the caves are more natural than the palaces. So first of all, be careful and be natural always for that. Then second thing she mentioned about the drainage system and cleanliness in Harappan civilization. So it was so good and it causes the healthy life. So nowadays we also must remember this thing, क्योंकि हमारा इंटीरियर डिजाइनिंग पार्ट में या हमारे पूरे सिटी प्लानिंग्स में या टाउन प्लानिंग्स में कहीं भी इसके बारे में आज भी उतना सीरियसनेस हमें नहीं दिखाई देता। इसलिए शहर के शहर जो है वो पूरे के पूरे ड्रेनेज के ये लगते हैं, यानी गार्बेज पूरा है, ऐसा जैसे शहरों का ये हो चुका है। सो हमें इससे सीखना चाहिए। थर्ड थिंग, उन्होंने जो सोर्सेस की बात की एंसेंट ये इसके बारे में, तो अजंता के पेंटिंग और जैन के आगम ग्रंथ जो है उनको भी हमें ध्यान देना होगा, क्योंकि इसमें भी कई सारे पैलेसेस और हमारा जो हमारे घरों का जो अंदर की संरचना थी उसके बारे में बहुत अच्छे वर्णन इसमें आए हुए। पर्टिकुलरली मैं अजंता का एक छोटा सा अभ्यासक हूँ, इसलिए मैं ये बात कहना चाहता हूँ। एंड देन मानसर की बात उन्होंने कही वास्तुशास्त्र केस में, मानसर वास्तुशास्त्र। तो मानसर जो हमने एक बार इसके बारे में जिक्र किया था हमारे वाकाटका डायनास्टी केस में, जो नागपुर के नजदीक रामटेक है, वहां शायद ये मानसर, क्योंकि वहां का टेम्पल को भी मानसर टेम्पल के नाम से जाना जाता है। तो स्कॉलर्स को इसके बारे में भी थोड़ा अध्ययन करना होगा। फोर्थ थिंग शी मेंशन अबाउट द मड वॉल्स एंड द मड प्लास्टर। आज भी जहां एक्सकैवेशन होता है मड वॉल्स प्राप्त होते हैं। एक एग्जांपल के तौर पर तेलंगाना स्टेट में निजामाबाद डिस्ट्रिक्ट में जो बोधसा शहर है, तो बोधन में आज भी जब हम चलते हैं तो मड वॉल्स आज भी हमें दिखाई देते हैं। तो इसका मतलब है कि ये जो 45 सिटीज वगैरह की हम बात करते हैं, उससे पहले मड वॉल्स का यूज किस तरह से शुरू हुआ। तो इंटीरियर डिजाइन के साथ साथ ये टाउन प्लानिंग केस में मड वॉल्स का यूज, मड प्लास्टर का यूज जो है आज भी हमें एक्सकैवेशन के में इसमें दिखाई देता है। सो एज इन आवर वन ऑफ द सेशन, हमारा एक लास्ट में जो सेशन हुआ था डॉक्टर एस बी होता साहब का, जो हमारे जॉइंट डायरेक्टर जनरल थे आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया के, उनका एक पर्टिकुलर सेशन हमने आर्कियोलॉजी, इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ द आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट्स इस टॉपिक पे रखा था। उसमें उन्होंने ये कहा था कि अगर आप एंसेंट इंडिया के बारे में सही मायने में अगर समझना चाहते हैं तो जितना ज्यादा से ज्यादा रूरल एरियाज में जा सकते हैं जाइए, ट्राइबल एरियाज में जाइए, उनका लाइफस्टाइल, लिविंग स्टाइल देखिए, आप उस एंसेंट इंडिया को आज भी देख सकेंगे। सो इट्स द रियल सेंस ऑफ आवर दिस एंसेंट इंडिया। तो इंटीरियर डिजाइन में भी हम ये शुरुआत कैसी थी हमारी मानव जाति की, समग्र मानव जाति की, वो आज भी वहां पर देख सकते हैं। तो इनका वो स्टेटमेंट आज यहाँ हमें ध्यान में आता है, क्योंकि उन्होंने जिस तरह से एंसेंट इंडिया का जर्नी अभी हमारे सामने स्पष्ट किया, तो एस बी होता साहब की ये बात हमें यहाँ पर स्पष्ट होती है। सो एज लास्ट आई जस्ट मेंशन्ड अबाउट दैट, हमारे एक पार्टिसिपेंट्स में एक नंद कुमार देशपांडे जी है, ही इज अ सीनियर स्कॉलर। वो हमेशा लिखते हैं कि सेव नेचर, लव नेचर, सेव नेचर फॉर द बेटर फ्यूचर। सो ये बात बहुत सही है। और आज इंटीरियर केस में हम ये भी कहना चाहते हैं कि जितना ज्यादा हो सकता है बी नेचुरल ऑलवेज, तो ये कोशिश कीजिए। और आज का ये सेशन बहुत ही अच्छा रहा। मैं फिर से एक बार आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ, शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ। और आज का हमारा सेशन जो है यहाँ पर हम रोकते हैं। मैं फिर से एक बार सभी स्कॉलर्स को ये रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ, हमारे आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चरल हेरिटेज ऑफ इंडिया से रिलेटेड जो भी नॉलेज आपके पास है, अगर आप सभी के साथ शेयर करना चाहते हैं, सो प्लीज मोस्ट वेलकम। ऐसे टॉपिक्स को लेकर के आगे आए, कि जिससे हम अपनी विरासत को दुनिया के सामने रख सकेंगे। सो थैंक्स अ लॉट अगेन, और आज का ये सेशन जो है हम यहाँ पर रखते हैं। थैंक यू कामत मैडम। फिर से हम टचअप में रहेंगे और हमारा ये सेशन जो है इसको हम आगे करते रहेंगे। थैंक यू।